unfortunately, my fingers are now numb, so I'm cack-handed when it comes to trying to deal with the small things on a model. So I wanted a model of Speedy, but I had to get somebody else to make it for me. So this is an over-the-shoulder account, as having got the kit and passed it on to this gentleman on the Isle of Wight, who is a retired dockyard shipwright, trained in wood and metal. And he had a fair amount of sort of badgering from me about doing this, that, and the other, which must have been absolute pain for him. But there we are. The result is a very good one. Now, let's start off talking about HMS Speedy. She was a sloop, two-mast sloop, built in the 1880s, or just about. She had many very effective captains who actually accomplished quite a lot with a small vessel, until in 1802 she landed up with Lord Thomas Cochran, in which she obtained the most important fame, because during his time with her in the Mediterranean, he was allowed to go cruising, i.e. to mess up French continental or Mediterranean traffic along the north coast of the Mediterranean. But she took a Spanish 32-gun frigate, which was a masterpiece of basically surprise, dissembly, and most unusual action. And he became famous for that. However, by the end of that year, he and she were captured by Admiral Lenoir with a squadron off Gibraltar, and Speedy was then given as a present to the Pope by Napoleon. Now, I also, before we go any further, just want to talk briefly about Chris Wotton. He is a kit designer and has been so for many years. And he's worked for Caldergraft and Amati, and then set up his own organization called Vanguard Models. If any of you've built a model from the 18th century at 1:64, it would probably have been designed, quite possibly been designed, by Chris Wotton. Now, let's have a look at the instructions. Now, the instructions are superb. It's a step-by-step account of how you go about it. It's fully illustrated, and it's very similar to those excellent books produced by Philip Reed, probably the best model maker of this period of ship in the UK, in Philip Reed's books, where he does a good description of the technique and what you've got to do, and then illustrates it. And this, of course, gives great confidence to the builder. Now, Chris invested in a laser cutter, and its abilities are really quite staggering. He also taught himself to use CAD and was therefore able to make resin parts highly accurate. Also, using this device, make excellent pre-cut, highly accurate components. Now, we'll just have a look through the various parts. This is actually all cut out of pear wood. And you can see how fine some of it is. It's very, very small parts in it. And here are the more bolder parts, the deck, and note that it's the lower deck and then the top deck, which note is all in one piece, a point I'll come to later. See the other parts there. Again, the other parts of the main skeleton. Now, I'll come back to that again, because it's not made out, some of it's not made out of wood, which is an interesting fact. Okay, and that rounds off some of the smaller parts, all done, just they can pop out, no cutting required. Marvelous. Even the cleats, look at that. And these are the resin moldings of the guns and also the swivels. And I think the detail, if you can see it on that, is pretty good. I can tell you on the finished model, it is very impressive. Now, here is a skeleton. It's made of MDF because it's more stable than wood. It's also pretty robust, given the fact that it has a weather deck, some fore and aft work in between the bulkheads and a lower deck, so it doesn't, nothing is likely to move. And there's the stern. The only thing I would say, of course, is that the MDF therefore needs fairing. And if I was constructing it, I would actually just round off the corners of the bulkheads to prevent any hard edges interfering with the planking that goes on later. Now, the deck is one piece, and I reckon this is one area where the kit can be improved. In this case, we increased the effect of the caulking lines between the planks, and the deck was given a light stain, which I think helped it. Not too much, because otherwise it'll destroy the whole thing, but it was worth it. Now, one of the improvements that the kit could make is to have some very thin, light-coloured wood and invite people to actually cut their own planks out, plank by plank, laying the deck. And it always shows when you actually are laying your own planking. Okay, this is the beginning of the initial planking taking place. It is basically all underwork for the top lot to come on. And the planking, of course, is actually straight, so it requires trimming. Now, any of you built up a model properly will know that a plank, particularly well below the whale, is the most extraordinary shape, dipping down towards the bow, funnily enough, as it goes round the curve. So whilst it's being cut to shape, it's going to require some manipulation to get into position. And if the planks which are supplied, which are basically straight, they've got to be trimmed, and then some sort of treatment has got to be given to them to make them render to being put into position. And here you see some of the second planking taking place. You can see some slight sort of difficulties on the bow there, but those actually will get covered up by something that comes later on. Here again, one's looking at top planking at the top and then the initial planking on the bottom, which has some sort of miscalculations in it, but that can all be filled because it's going to be covered anyhow by the top planking. I can assure you the finished hull is absolutely fine. Apart from anything else, it's plated. Okay, this is another shot of the planking at the bow. Very straightforward. Useful pins, those. Now, this is a stain put on the lower part, the underwater part of the hull, which is going to be plated. But we wanted to test the stain because I wanted to get the top side stained to make a contrast with the plating that was going to go on the lower part of the hull. Notice the hole in the keel. Now, that is to take a rod or a tube that goes right up into the bowels of the vessel and is then actually used to secure her to her base inside her case. And there is the second planking finished. Now, if you look at the bulwarks and the sheer strake area and the whale, these are all one piece etched, and I'm quite impressed by the hook and butt etching on the whale. But it actually comes out all right in the final model. One of the reasons he does this is actually to help the inexperienced modeler get on reasonably fast what he's doing. But quite a good result, I reckon. Now, here's the deck. Now, this is another improvement I asked for because the model is marketed just with the guns to be sort of stuck in position, but with no breaching lines or tackle. But I wish to have that put on, and it's been done, as you'll see in later slides, really very effectively. And there is the complete gun deck with all the guns fully equipped. And I think it looks reasonably realistic. One of the things that could be improved also on the deck is to see if one could introduce a slight bit more camber to the deck, which would have been there for real. Now, the bow, basket work I call it, the top rail is not as it really would be because the top rail should have a twist in it and come up nicely in a transverse position under the cat head. And so the only way we could get around that was to put a knee in its place. But for real, it would look different to that. but on the model with everything else going on, it's not too bad. Now the plating is brand new. It's comes in separate plates, was provided in separate plates, and has gone on very nicely. And note the contrast between the top sides, which have been stained, and the plating, which I wanted to be achieved. Now, one of the things I asked the model maker to do was to see if he could sort of age the plating, but he didn't want to do that. He wanted it to come up as it was off the slip, brand new. But I went into Antigua Ships, run by one of our members, Alan McCreel. He has a gallery workshop near Taunton, ship model repair shop. And in the entrance, he had a big model, quite a big model of a United States whaling vessel. And it was plated, but it looked like it had come back from the South Seas. It was completely covered in all sorts of colors. And he achieved it very simply by adding salt and sugar and water together into a thick slime, putting it on, leaving it for a while, and then taking it off with water. Such a simple thing. But I would suggest people try it out on some spare plating before they try it out on the actual model. Now, this is the ship's boat, made of wood, with a lot of the parts already pre-done, not the planking, obviously, that's got to be cut and shaped to size. But I tell you that that model is about just over 2 inches long. It's a remarkable piece. Now, with the kit, you also get one that's actually resin printed, which is very good and very detailed, but it does require painting and very sensitive painting to make it as realistic. In this particular picture, the bottom one, I like the way this model maker has put in the oars, chucked in quickly and not tidily, all in straight lines along across the thwarts. This is much more realistic in my view, as the thing would have been. And there is the completed hull. Again, you can see the contrast between the top sides and the plating. You can see the boat in its position and all the other equipment on deck. And there she is again in a different light. And a final view of the deck with all the equipment on it. Now this is a professional model builder, effectively. Does one thing at a time. Has completed all his spars, all prepared for fitting the boat coming off the deck whilst the rigging's done, going back on afterwards, and the overboard equipment, the anchors. Nicely done, ready for assembly. And there is the standing rigging in place, boat missing because you don't want it in the way. Black thread provided and all of the appropriate gauge. And you'll notice there's a difference between the shrouds and the backstays and so on. It's quite sensitively provided, but I do have one reservation which I'll come to towards the end. Now, this is an example of what goes on inside the instruction book. The order in which you approach the rigging is up to every individual model maker, but he does divide it down into stages. And it's a great help to see it all broken up so that you can understand what you've got to achieve. I really do recommend these instruction booklets he does. They're quite excellent. And there is the completed model. And this is the last slide. Sorry about the background. That was not my photograph. But I can assure you that it has been rigged very sensitively. I've seen several models where there's been an excellent hull, beautifully detailed, and rigging set up, standing rigging okay, ruined by oversized running rigging, too white. I had to actually get some extra thread for the model maker, which was more grey than the one provided, because running rigging is not white unless you've got a very smart yacht. And a ship like this, it would be grey and heavily used. All in all, a delightful model of a dear little brig sloop, of a famous one, and it's scaled to 1:64. And I've now got 5 models of minor warships between 1740 and 1780, with all the rigs available: ship, brig, ketch, cutter, and schooner. And the only one that's not a kit model is the schooner, because I made it from scratch 60 years ago. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much.